All right, at 5 minutes after the hour of 8 o'clock, let's join Ms. Dennise Demming. Good morning to you.
Good morning, and thank you for having us. I'm Dennise Demming, and we're doing Power Conversations. And this morning's Power Conversation is with Gregory Sloan Seale. Gregory, are you there with us?
I believe I am.
Yes, you are. Yes, I just wanted to hear you. Hope you are fantastic this morning. Our conversation is about youth violence, reduction, and prevention. That's what we are going to be talking about. And I wanted to start by asking you, I know that you're widely recognized for your efforts. Tell me something about Gregory Sloan Seale that the public might not know. What has influenced your work in this field?
What has influenced my work? Well, what can I say? I myself, growing up in Belmont, was a very active young person, underachiever academically in school. Used to get in trouble a lot. Didn't do too well academically. Not that I didn't have the ability, I just didn't have the focus. Um, what I think steered me away from a lot of trouble outside of school and outside the home was sports. I played a lot of sports, and when I was in St. Mary's College, Father Difu, I was one of what they call Father Difu boys. He used to take some of the troublemakers under his wing and get them involved in tennis and squash and so forth. So I played squash for quite a few years, about 3 years, maybe from Form 2 to 5 when I was in St. Mary's. And that was something that kept myself and a few others occupied at the time. Um, what do people not know about me? Boy, I've been in the media over the years so much. I think people know a lot about me. um, but just to say that from St. Mary's College, I actually attended 5 high schools before I got into university. And I changed schools for various reasons. Some of them behavior, some of them underperforming. I went to St. Mary's, did Form 5 there, then I repeated, went to St. Joseph College. Um, then I got an opportunity to go away to study. And when I went away, I actually passed through 3 high schools before I got into university. So that's all part of my journey, and it's also part of my understanding of young people and the need to always be supportive and offer opportunity. Opportunity for me is very key when it comes to young people and giving them the ability to have choices. Yeah. Um, what else do people not know about me? Well, I've been married 30 years
Go on.
now.
You've been married 30 years now.
30
Gregory,
years.
that is really wonderful in terms of when I hear people say they've been married for such a long time, because I really believe that family and what marriage brings is a fundamental part of society. And it helps the society to grow and develop. And I'm not being formal that you have to get married, but I'm
No, no.
saying those long relationships, I think, are so useful. You
Yeah,
know. So that is
particularly if
something I didn't know about you. But here's something I wanted to ask you about. You said you played a lot of squash. Do we
yeah, but
still play
sports,
squash?
football.
Yeah.
Um, nah, I hung up my racket. Squash is very demanding on the body. Yeah? You
It
know what I
is.
mean? And but I still play football.
Yeah.
That's about the only sport that I fully engage in. I still swim. I like to swim, and I walk. I walk in my neighborhood as much as I can. You know, fitness is very important to me. No, I don't play squash. I hung up my squash racket when my older sister, who never played squash when I played squash, beat me in the oval, and I was like, "What? Okay, time to retire." I hadn't played for years. And she was like, come and play with me, come and play with me. And I played at the boy. So I said to
Yes.
myself, wow, okay, let me
There was
stick
a
to the
time when
football.
squash was there was a time when squash was very, very popular in our country. And a lot of people played it. I just played it for a short time. It's not my kind of game because it's just too hard for me.
Well, it's demanding on your knees, on because that start and stop, But I enjoyed it while I played it, to tell you the honest truth, and I still enjoy watching it. And my sister, my brother-in-law, and my nephew were still they're still heavily involved in squash, within the local scene. And my
Yeah.
nephew was also a national champion, junior and senior champion, and Caribbean champion also. So
Wonderful, wonderful. So, Gregory, you've been involved in a number of programs or initiatives that have been successful in reducing youth violence. Can you share some of those stories with us?
yeah, definitely. Well, I started off my career in 1989 in Canada, working in a facility for juvenile delinquents, a residential care facility for juvenile delinquents, kids who were coming out of the system, and trying to reintegrate into their homes, into society. So that's where I first started. Was it ever in my crystal ball? No, it wasn't. Was I going to do youth work? No, I wasn't. I was gearing my head mentally to get into mainstream, a bank job, insurance, something along those lines. Both of my parents were professionals. My mom, who's still around, she'll be 92 this September. She was an accountant, and my dad was a lawyer. So it was really streamlined to go along. I guess what I grew up and saw in around me. You know. So I did sociology and psychology at University of Windsor in Canada, and when I graduated, um, I was told by immigration Canada that basically you can only get a job for a year within your field of study. So I did social and psych, so it really pointed me only to social services. So I looked up in the yellow pages, sent out some resumes, and the first interview I went to was for this agency, and they hired me, and I was just going to be there for a year. So I said, okay, fine, yeah, let me do it. After working there for about 2 weeks, what I realized I was about at that juncture I was 22 years old, and a lot of the youth I was working with were adolescent males between the ages of 13 to 19. So a lot of these guys, the 19-year-olds in particular, we were dressing the same, listening to the same music. You know what I mean? For all intents and purposes, these are guys that I could have limed with, see myself liming with. Some of them had a good sense of humor, everything else. But what I recognized was that I had the rapport, and I understood where they were coming from, and because I was a troublesome young person myself, kind of um, anti-establishment to a point, and I recognized in them that the only difference between me and them was the fact that I had opportunity and I had support, and they didn't. Because a lot of things that they would have gotten in trouble for were things that I would have engaged in. Nothing major, but things that uh, you could have gotten in trouble for in Canada. Yeah, and I said to myself, wow, I mean, this is like interesting. You know what I mean? And that's what really got me. After 2 weeks, I said, wow, I really enjoyed this job. I really enjoyed the rapport with the youths. At the time, I myself was a youth, as I say. So as I got older and I continued to work with young people, I ended up staying in Canada, working in that agency for over 5 years. Um, I got the opportunity, to get that experience in a setting that was positive for young people, supportive for young people, and where I saw young people get the opportunity to really catch themselves and develop and rehabilitate to an extent, or even habilitate, let's say. um, so when I came back home with that mindset, recognizing that when I was growing up in Trinidad, there was overwhelming amount of negativity and negative reinforcement towards young people, right? And this is back in the 70s, 80s when I was growing up. You know what I mean? And when I say so, we tend to be really focused on negative reinforcement. We don't look at everyday things that young people do that are good, that are positive, that are progressive, and congratulate them for it. But the one slip up they do is like, oh God, is always focused on the negative. You didn't do this, you didn't do that. You don't look at see what they do, what they actually do. You know what I mean? So I came back with that positive reinforcement sort of um, practice in my mind. So when I came back home, I started to work with the YMCA in 1995, right? In a program that was initially started off as a street youth outreach program, all right, of displaced youth who didn't live at home. A lot of them lived on the streets and abandoned buildings and so forth in and around Port of Spain. And, in that work, I also recognized that for a lot of the young people who were living on the streets at the time, that they were actually natural leaders. They were intelligent, not book sense, but life, understanding certain things in life. And I recognize, over time, that for these young people to leave home, to leave what they knew, no matter how under resourced it was and how abusive it may have been, it's really a leap of faith to go into the street and try to survive, you know. So in working with these young people, with these youth, some of who I'm still in contact with today, and some of who really, um, really found success, in their lives. And these are kids who would have been, kind of discarded by society, because the YMCA having to set up this program in 1995, why would you have to set up a program? You know what I mean?
Mm.
If
Gregory, I just want to ask you something about that. You said that the YMCA set up a street youth reinforcement program.
outreach outreach program, yeah.
Outreach. And you also said that you saw leaders in these youth who were out without homes, who were on the street, and so on. Could you tell me a little more about that? That they were leaders. Are you saying that some of these youth who end up on the street, who end up having to survive like that, sometimes that they have some leadership skills that we ought to be looking at?
Oh, definitely. Even today, the youth who live in the blocks, a lot of the youth who causing trouble and so forth, these are young people who have a certain, I mean, listen, everyone has the ability to you know what I mean, to lead to some extent, right? But what I'm saying is that for a young person to leave their what they know, to go into the unknown, and these are conversations I would have had with them too, in the sense that they just felt that they wanted something different, you know. I'm talking about 12, 13, 14 year olds, and they would leave their homes, and some of them came from Valencia, Toco. I end up in Port of Spain. You know what I mean? I mean, to take that leap of faith at that age says something. It says something, right? And we can look at it negatively and say, well, it says that they're just wayward and they don't care, whatever have you. But for me, I looked at it as, they have a certain level of self-confidence and a certain level of initiative to say to themselves, for whatever reason, I can't stay here. I don't want this anymore. I'm going to look for something different, hopefully better, right? For a lot of them, it didn't end up being much better, other than the fact that they had the freedom to move and that sort of thing, you know. Definitely, you need to have some leadership skills to negotiate the streets. You know what I
Mm,
mean? And survive, and
yeah,
survive.
yeah.
You know,
Is that program still being done by the YMCA?
to the best of my knowledge, it's not.
It's
Not
not.
not not how we not how it was not how it was run. I mean, the YMCA still has programs and so forth for young people, but I'm actually not certain if they have an outreach program where they actively search out young people who are in difficult circumstances and that sort of thing.
So, are you aware of whether there is an outreach program in the country for young people who are in difficult circumstances?
Well, there are definitely groups. I'm familiar with Rainbow Rescue. I think Credo Foundation, that operates on Nelson Street. I'm not sure if Marian House. I've kind of lost touch with that aspect of it. But definitely, and there are quite a few homes that still function, and if there's a youth in trouble, that someone refers them and say, listen, I've seen this young man on the road, so on and so forth. They do have some homes, privately run homes, that would, try and see if they can offer them some support. So it does exist. right? I mean, and then the government has the Children's Authority,
Mhm, mhm.
right, which has a mandate to really assist children and under 18s who are in difficulty. Yeah,
All right. Gregory, the next question I'm going to ask you, and just before I'm going to just promote our program to invite people to call us. The
sure.
next question I want to ask you is how would you describe the current state of youth violence in our community? And while you think about that, this is a conversation, power conversation with Gregory Sloan Seale about youth violence and its prevention. Call us on 222 Talk. That's 222-8255. If you're from Canada or you're abroad, it's toll free. Call us on 866-525-1099. Or if you want to WhatsApp us, it's 868-318-1021. Power 102 digital app. There's a website, it's on YouTube, there's Facebook. So we are all over the place. There's M&E TV, there's Flow, there's Amplia, Power Conversation. So back to this discussion with Gregory Sloan Seale about youth and violence. And what do you think? The question that I was asking is how do you describe the current state of youth violence in our country?
Yeah, no, at this juncture, I think we're going through an exceptionally difficult period. Um, and the thing is the proliferation of the high powered weapons. I mean, that's a source for serious concern. Okay. We see what's going on. Um, However, I don't think it's something that we can't address if we really and truly, put the effort in. Um, Young people, w- adolescence is a period of psycho-emotional sort of upheaval, so to speak. You're going through puberty, you have a lot of hormonal changes going on. Socially, there's a whole social construct where, you want to fit in, you want to find your group, these sort of things. Yeah. Um, and it's important for young people, especially adolescents, to be engaged in positive activity. And this is where sports, this is where other types of activities, clubs, scouts, let's say in the school system, is very, very important, right? At a community level, communities play 90% of the role in really engaging young people. And what I've done over the years, working in the Y, working in the Ministry of National Security, where I was for 15 and a half years, was an asset development based approach, meaning that you look in a community and you look for the physical and human resource assets, right? And all communities throughout Trinidad and Tobago have those, be it physically in terms of community centers, which we love to build, right? We have them all over the country. And where they don't have community centers, we definitely have churches and mosques and mandirs and schools, right? That have places where young people can go to engage in activities, right? So first of all, we recognize that we have the spaces. Do we have the human resources to do programs and so forth? If you do a walk around various communities, and this can be Beetham, Sealots, Laventil, this could be Hague Street in Caranage, um, Enterprise in Chaguanas, um, you know, uh, I mean, anywhere, train line Arima. And I'm naming these communities because these are communities that people will view as they will view them negatively. But if you walk through these communities, you recognize that within those communities, there are many community members who are doing their part to build the social fabric within their communities. It could be the football coach who has a little football club going, a little team going, cricket coach, could be some retired teacher or other who is tutoring 4 or 5 students in their porch every evening so they can, excel in their academics. Um, it could be the welder, the woodworker who takes in 1 or 2 little youths. and says, come and learn, or the car mechanic. I mean, I see it, I've seen it, right? So what we need to do is recognize that within our communities, we have these assets, both physical and human, right? And we need to support, well, first of all, the physical spaces, they are good places to have programs, right? And programs for young people, it doesn't necessarily have to be the run of the mill, what we do, the join in, um, the masonry, welding, these sort of things. Those things are excellent. And if a youth, I mean, they should always have those types of programs available. So for young people who are inclined in that, right, they can be ushered into that and kept busy and kept motivated. But on the flip side of that, our sporting programs, we just don't have enough. And they would say funding, but I would say that, it's much cheaper to build a positive human being than to fix a broken adult, right? That's an old adage, but it just makes sense. You know what I mean? So, over time, we have to recognize that building more prisons, hiring more police, I mean, security guards. I mean, I think this is security industry in Trinidad employs. At one point, I remember it was over 50,000 people. And if the police service is 7,000 officers, that's the sanction strength around there, 7,000, 8,000, right? It's what, six times? The
Yes.
security industry is six times more human resources. So we have 60,000 people roaming around an island of 1.4 million, just trying to keep persons from taking things, breaking things, harassing people. Whereas if we poured those resources, you could imagine if we had, and I've been saying this for decades, if we had 10,000, just give us 10,000 social workers, you know what I mean? To work within our communities, we wouldn't, people could do what they actually like to do. You know what I mean? As
Yeah.
opposed to, yeah, go ahead.
Gregory, you're talking there about breaking. It is easier, and that's such a wonderful statement. It is easier to develop a positive person than to repair a broken person. And we seem to be developing a lot of broken young people. So I wonder, what could we do? I mean, you talked about 10,000 social workers would make a difference, but what could people do in a home to begin
Right.
to be positive? You know.
Well, I would say, it only when I came back home, because I left here when I was like 18, right? So when I left here, I myself was a young person. I myself was caught up in my own, teenage dramas and having fun and not really focusing too much on the serious part of life. When I came back home as a professional, it's then it really dawned on me. I didn't realize how negative we could be. I just didn't realize that until I came back home, started to work with that cohort of young persons, just to realize how much negativity surrounds us in Trinidad and Tobago. And the thing is, intrinsically, we are very positive, fun loving, kind individuals. You know what I mean? And I saw that immediately. Well, I knew that growing up. I mean, even growing up, I mean, I grew up in Belmont, right? Closer to the Savannah side, but I mean, as a boy, I was driven all in the streets, riding my bike all over East Port of Spain, Belmont, and so forth. And, I would have seen and experienced the love, right? Even within a space, because Belmont in those days had a negative connotation to it, right? We had, they had places where they had bad boys and whatever have you. But still, within the whole scheme of things, there was so much positivity and so much love. And that's something, once again, that when I worked in the ministry, when I worked in the YMCA, and I would go to various communities that people, view with a lot of skepticism. And I'm not saying that some of it is not unfounded, that, that those spaces are not unsafe, right? But let's recognize that the overwhelming majority of the people that live there, I mean, they just try to mind their own business and and try to live as best as they can and raise their children as best as they can, right? In an environment that is constantly tugging and pulling at their children and at them too, in a negative direction. So what can the ordinary person do? Listen, the ordinary person, myself included, we all have to recognize that there's a lot of good out there. There's a lot of good in Trinidad and Tobago. There's a lot of good in our young people. And whatever we can do, I tell people, listen, deal with your family first and foremost. Okay? Persons have come to me over the years, I want to volunteer, I want to volunteer. I said, do you have children? Yes, I have children. When do you want to volunteer? In the evening? I said, doesn't your child need you in the evening? I said, the best thing for you to do, if you want to volunteer, I would say go and spend time with your with home. Get home early. Don't come down to the Y until 7 in the evening and then go home to your child or adolescent, right? No matter how good you think they may be, they still need you at this time. And maybe what you can do is talk to your child and find out from them if they have a friend or two who are struggling, who are not getting support at home, who and see if you can pull them in and work with them, right? They already have the contact through your child, your son or your daughter, and maybe you can do that volunteerism at home or closer to home within your community. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And
Gregory, I just want to say that that is such a brilliant idea, and it's an excellent story that someone comes to the YMCA and offers to help, and you say to them, "Okay, thank you very much, but what's happening at home?" Work with your child, work with your child's friend, make sure that they are all right, and that will build community. How did people respond when you told them that?
well, those who had children and that sort of thing would be like, I never thought about that. That makes so much sense. You know what I mean? And it's just a redirection of the energy. And it just goes to show that sometimes we're not looking at we're not looking at what's right in front of us. You know what I mean? That
Yeah.
may need the attention. We look outside and see how we can help, not recognizing that within your own home, your child may require that support. And for us
Mhm.
to we think that we need um, you know that everything's okay at home because we have a TV, there's food on the table, these sort of things. But adolescents need and let me say, I have three daughters. The youngest is 17, the oldest is 27. So I've been through the adolescence with girls um, at home, and definitely it's a period where you know they don't want to necessarily hear from their parents. They don't even want to be around you too much, right? Because they're finding themselves. So we have to recognize that also, right? And if we're true with ourselves, we'd recognize that when we were adolescents too, it's a time where we wanted to kind of, test our wings and fly a little bit without mommy and daddy, that sort of thing. But in saying that, there are also a lot of young people in Trinidad and Tobago who didn't get the grounding from 0 to 13, 14. And they're seeking that. They're actually seeking that, right? And this is where I'm saying where persons within the communities, if you could identify, you see them when they start to stray, they're out in the street a lot, they're liming a lot. You pass them in your car and say, oh God, so and so child, liming, well, that's a future criminal, this kind of thing, right? I hear it, I, I've seen it, and I say to myself, okay, you see it, right? Well, that's not my business. That's not, well, you know what? It's all our business. Because if there's a future criminal growing up in your community, hear what? He's going to be distressing your community. So it's best you take them in now when you can, when they're young and they're impressionable, right? And I'm just saying, try and work with one. Just try and work with one. And a lot of people do. So don't get me wrong. In all
Yeah.
these communities I named, there are people doing work beyond the call of duty. So they are there, right? They're there. What I'm saying is that we need to continue to promote this and put things in place within the communities that can support what they are doing and encourage others to get involved. That's what I'm saying. If we could take a little slice of the security pie, right, of those 60,000 strong security officers, right, and have social workers involved instead. You know what I mean? Just we could do so much more. And I've met so many over the years security officers who go into night school, trying to improve themselves, but they work in 12-hour shifts, 6 days a week. And it's like snakes and ladders, you know what I mean? You reach a certain level and you're trying your best. And so the point I'm making is there are people out there who want to contribute more to their society, who have the aptitude, the attitude, but they don't have the resources and they don't have the support to get over that hump. So they find themselves in a situation where they're constantly just in survival mode. Okay,
Yeah.
they're working, they're not doing anything negative, but these are resources that are just sitting in a booth, standing in a booth for 12 hours a day, where they could be out there working with the youths on the block. You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Mentoring them, um, you know, getting
So,
them involved in
Gregory,
more.
you're talking about getting 10,000 social workers who could be on the blocks, who could be helping people who are struggling, helping children who are trying to learn. There's something else you said which I found very important. You talked about from 0 to 13, that is where the grounding occurs. Now, for that to happen, what changes do you think we should make for that audience in our country, that 0 to 13 audience, where they're now developing values? And right now, my impression is that a lot of those values are negative, and we need to be able to transform that. Are there programs that you would suggest, or activities that you would suggest to focus on that audience of the 0 to 13?
Okay, now people might think it's utopian what I'm talking about. 10,000. What I wanted to understand something. Right now, we're spending hundreds of millions of dollars on security, which is kind of preventative, but after the fact, right? Um, all I'm saying is, let's look at those resources and see how we could carve out, how we can turn some of those security persons into outreach workers, social workers, right? That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. Okay? Because I think if we could start to shift a little bit, and I'm not talking about defunding the police or anything like that. I'm talking about even within the security services, right? If we could take a more proactive approach, a more strategic approach, and look at prevention, right? And supportive sort of approach, as opposed to merely just protecting people and things, right? And reacting after a crime is done, okay? That it will go a very long way. And I've seen it right here in Trinidad and Tobago in reducing youth crime, youth violence, and so forth. Okay? And when I say social workers, I'm saying that in a very broad sense, but I'm also talking within that 10,000, within that 5,000, within that 2,000. Listen, if you get 2,000 even, right? I'm talking about sports, utilize our schools within all the communities, right? Um, to have programs that are youth oriented, right? Get the youths involved in IT, in sports, in music production. I mean, we're so creative. We have Trinidad music, Trinidad, right? Big genre. All right. The youths like it. When they talk to the youths on them, they say, listen, I would sing something positive, but it don't sell, it don't give me no pips. Right? So we had to find a way to engage the young people and see how we could, just make learning more exciting, make learning more relevant, and these sort of things. Yeah. Um, sorry, Dennise. kind of kind of
No,
went
no.
off on a tangent there. But you see, I see it in my. These are things that we actually worked on and put into practice and bore fruit. So the thing is, I see a Trinidad that can work, but can work with the current um not the current well the current structures if we fed it with the human resources. We have sports officers, we have community officers within the government. Do we have enough? No, we do not have enough. Do we have enough district health nurses who I understand used to walk the streets, right? House to house. You talk about 0 to 13 when a child is born. Who is following up in the home? If you identify an issue, right, in the home, domestic violence, substance abuse, neglect, and so forth, within the community, you have a team of social workers, of outreach workers who can then go in and assist in whatever way, right? There is a way to build the system, but it needs to be resourced with human beings. We have the systems ready. I hear people talking about legislation. I hear people talking about finances and these sort of things. And it's not that we don't have finances. Trinidad has money. What we're not doing is that we're not spending it in the right places, right? We have
Yeah.
to understand that, right? Even with the young persons that I've worked with over the years, they will tell you, I grew up in a home that was quite frugal. My parents were very frugal, right? And my parents always told us, they said, listen, when you work for your money, because I started to work when I was 14 during the holidays, right? I was a grocery packer at True Value when True Value first opened, right? And then I worked in races because I live in the Savannah, close to the Savannah, so I used to work in races, right?
Yes.
Horse racing, that is.
Yes.
So when I had my money, right, I realized that when I spend my money, what am I getting out of it? You know what I mean? And my parents raised me to understand that listen, money is just a means to an end, right? And what you take with your money, you exchange for a good or a service, right? And you have to determine if that good or that service is what you want to exchange your hard-earned money for, right? And if it's bringing you the benefits that you require. And all I'm saying is, as a country, right, we have to look at where we put in our finance. Do we want to put it in, as I said, um, after the fact type of programs, or do we want to put it in preventative programs? Do we want to
Yeah.
build positive people, or do we want to continue to fix broken people?
Yeah.
Right. So it's a paradigm shift, and in the and once again, the money is here because government spending money, but what are they spending it on, and how important at the end of the day are the things we need to weigh. We need to weigh it. What is more important for the people of Trinidad and Tobago, for our communities, for our mental health? I mean, I see so
Yeah.
many young people more and more walking the streets, and it's heartbreaking because having numerous hundreds, if not thousands, of relationships with young people over the decades in Trinidad and Tobago, I know that the large majority are just crying out for meaning in their lives.
Yes, you can see that in a number of young people. You said that you had spent 15 years at the Ministry of National Security. On reflection, what would you have done differently?
Can you repeat that, Denise? You kind of broke up. Sorry.
I'm saying that you spent 15 years in the Ministry of National Security, and your focus has always been on violence and youth and how to prevent it. On reflection, if you just had to look back on that, what would you have done differently?
Um, what would I have done differently? Well, I can tell you what we were doing was impacting in a positive way. What would I have done differently? I don't know. Maybe lobby, maybe be out there a little bit more, lobbying for that type of transitioning, you know, um, away from a focus, well, not away, towards more of a focus of community building and an asset development approach, looking at what we already have and how we can build on it, because we tend to always want we tend to always want. And when I worked in the YMCA, I visited YMCAs in the Caribbean, in South America, Central America, and so forth, where they were very small physical spaces, and YMCAs would have met um, under trees, um, in very small spaces. And Trinidad, I'll never forget, um, either the YMCA or when I first started working in ministry, there was actually, it was the ministry, because it was IDB funded, and an IDB evaluator came to evaluate the program and just to check out things. And I took them into a few communities, and I remember going into the Betham in fourth phase, phase 4, that they call Heliard. Um, and I'm walking with this lady, an American, and she's walking around. She's like, "But all these are concrete structures." I said, "Some of these houses have air conditions in them." And she's like, "Well, there's a basketball court." She says, "So this is what you call a low-income ghetto community?" And I'm said, "This is what is considered in Trinidad, right?" And then she hears beep, beep, beep. There's a garbage truck coming to collect garbage, and she was like, "Oh, this is fascinating." And for her, she was like, "This is a community. This physically, this is a." She's not seeing what everyone else sees outside of who lives in Ibiza. If you understand what I'm saying. And I was
Yeah.
like, you know
Well,
what? We
what you're saying is that we have a lot of the assets, we have a lot of the physical structures. Well, what we don't seem to have is the human resource part of it that will create a different approach and that will inspire people to move to a different level. That's what I'm hearing.
correct. And that's what we were doing when I worked in the ministry, was really adding value to the communities, building the competency in the communities. And when I say building the competency, so we saw risk factors as child abuse, child neglect, domestic violence, substance use and abuse, right? Conflict, right? Intra-community conflict leading to physical violence. What do? We went to UE, we went to COSTAT, we went to the various institutions, UE Open Campus, and we identified from the community persons who are already doing these types of things, and we got them enrolled in psychology counseling programs. We would have graduated over 200 persons in mediation through dispute resolution. At the time it was housed in West Moorings there, right, at the Chamber of Commerce,
Yeah.
right? Dispute resolution. And I'm talking about young persons, middle-aged persons from what we would consider underserved communities, high-risk communities, pick your adjective, right? And they all attended. They were all very enthusiastic. Most of them, I wouldn't say they all graduated, but most of them graduated, and most of them went back to their communities and used the skills and knowledge that they gained to try and continue to have a positive impact on the community.
So, Gregory, how could we escalate that? Because what you're talking about is a strategy that you took people from within those communities, educated them, raised their level of awareness. Some of them have gone back. And you talked about 200, but we need to escalate that to, you keep saying 10,000, and I love that number. How do we escalate that so that we impact the communities?
How do we escalate that? Well, I mean, listen, we have corporate Trinidad and Tobago who could definitely. So you have to understand the problem. The problem hasn't really changed that much. The underlying issues. What has changed, obviously, is the access to these high-powered weapons and the brazenness of our young people. Some of them, very few of them actually, but nonetheless, to use it as they've been using it. You know what I mean? So that's changed. So we need to find out. But the underlying issues of child neglect, child abuse, and neglect is a form of abuse. People believe when they leave their 12-year-old to mind their 5-year-old and 3-year-old sibling, that's fine. And you know what? in some circumstances, I'm not knocking anyone. I understand that, but this is where the state, this is where the community, this is where private sector needs to analyze and put in some supportive structures. Okay, right? But we need to recognize what the risk factors are. Each risk factor has a protective factor that we can institute to deal or mitigate against the risk factor. And then we just have to come up with a way of redirecting resources to fill those gaps, right? And it's very important, especially for our, as I would say, yes, 0 to 16, 0 to 16, 17, right? They need that support. Do we need a lot of money? No, we don't. I visited Cuba in 2004. I visited Cuba in 2004, and I stayed in a household with a family. And they had a young girl. And actually, it was a family trip. It was a family trip, right? Baby started to go to Cuba, and I was like, "Oh, let's take advantage of this." And we stayed in a bed and breakfast in somebody's home. And the young daughter was a gymnast, and my two daughters also at the time were doing gymnastics. And we went to the gym. I wanted to see the gym, so we walked to the gym. This is in Havana, fairly dilapidated. But when I walked in there, it was like children and youth galore who not doing gymnastics, doing fencing, doing boxing, doing judo, doing wrestling. Outside, they playing basketball, football, baseball. I was like, wow. And listen to me, this is not no state of the art situation. It may have been once upon a time, but we all know the Cuban situation, right? But they, if we could take a little piece out of their human development construct, right? Because their focus is human development. I mean, they export doctors, sports. Right here in Trinidad, we have nurses, we have doctors, we have sports people. Our gold medalist was trained by a Cuban javelin thrower,
Yes,
right?
yes,
So what I'm saying is, right here in the Caribbean, we have expertise and we have a framework to show you what human development is all about, from zero to adolescence. You know what I mean? Let's just
yes.
take it from there. Let's just take it from there, right? You just pour resources into your community, right? And then so much of the other things that we are putting plasters on, bandages on, would slowly but surely start to disappear. And it has to do, uh, uh, social ecology is like biological ecology, right? If we look at, no, I'm going off here,
Yeah, yeah, you're going
but
off, but
but
here's
I want,
something.
us to understand something, right? That you go to the doctor for an illness, and the doctor tell you, well, you need more exercise, you need to change your diet, and you start to change your diet if you have the discipline to do that. You start to do a little more exercise if you have the discipline to do that. You cut out certain things out of your diet because it's just not good for you, and you realize, whoa, my arthritis feeling a little better. I'm not getting those migraines as I used to. Um, I'm losing weight. I'm feeling good. What did I do? It's a mental shift. It's a. If you understand where I'm coming from, it's really and truly as simple as I said that. It's really and truly the same in human development and community development. We just have to have the discipline and the focus and the consistency, and you will see
Well,
the change.
I want to add to that. We need to have the strategy. If we don't have
Of
the
course,
strategy, then we won't be able to encourage and embrace the communities. So we need
of
to
course.
create a strategy that focuses on the youth and focuses on violence and focuses on development of our communities.
And we
You
have
know,
these strategies. We have these strategies. These strategies, I've seen these strategies. I've seen
so
the community
so
development strategies. I mean,
tell me.
we have some brilliant people working in our government, having spent 15 and a half years there, which to this day I still cannot believe I spent 15 and a half years working in government. But I have interfaced with very professional, very knowledgeable people. But once again, with all the knowledge and all the skills, we need to redirect some resources into the prevention. into the supportive line of
Well,
things.
I'm happy to hear you say that we have the strategies, because it seems to me that we are stuck moving
Oh
from
yeah.
strategy to action. That what is required to transform a strategy into action, we just seem to be stuck there and not doing the things to ensure that the action happens and therefore the development occurs. But as we are almost about to end this conversation, which has been absolutely wonderful, tell me, what would you like our listeners to take away from this conversation?
Look right in front of you what needs to be fixed, and try to work on that, right? We're talking about young people. um, don't fear our young people, because they are functioning with a certain level of fear themselves that's masked as bravado. A lot of the youths I worked with over the years are youths who've been involved in gangs and so forth, and trust me, they are just as frightened as the next person, right? And that is why they join gangs. That is why they get involved in what they get involved in, right? It's really strength in numbers for them, and so forth. And what I would want to take away from this is that there's a lot of work we can do on an individual level. Even if one person takes on one person, right? Um, to say, okay, you know what, I'm gonna work with this one individual, and it could be your own child, because I'll tell you something. As a parent, sometimes you neglect what's happening at home because closer to home you can't deal. Maybe you're re-stimulated with your child, because 9 out of 10 times your child going to be a mirror image of you. You know what I mean? Um, so seek out those that you think or need assistance, and see how you can assist them as best as you can, right? And in the YMCA, we used to say, um, when we had volunteer drives, if anyone can give of their time, treasure, right, or skill,
Mhm.
right?
And just
So it doesn't mean money, but it means your time. And I'll tell you something, having worked with youth over the years, a lot of them have come back and told me that their time in the YMCA, they say it's just the time you all gave us to kind of debrief and recognize too that our young people going through a lot of stress. There's a lot of stress, online peer pressure. We live in an information world where we see so much, and we know as adults. I mean, let's be real. As adults, we want things, we covet things, we see things. Not everybody, but a lot of us. You want the nice car, you want the bling, you want a 75-inch TV. You want all of that, right? We want all of that, and we are adults, right? And we should know better and understand, things a little better. What for the young person? The young person who kind of in the wilderness, looking to find themselves. Whatever they've been taught from 0 to 12, that's all they have to help them to navigate, right? What do we expect? What do we expect if there's nothing out there to help them to navigate, to capture them and focus them to find their passions and work on their passions? What do we expect? That they will just fall into place and everything will be normal and be great? No. So what we have now with this level of violence and antisocial behavior is because as a community we've dropped the ball, and we've left the children to stray, basically. And as I said, I'm not laying blame on any one thing, because it's all of us. I mean, we
but
all
it's
have to
it's
accept responsibility, right? At some level, and I myself, I mean, at this juncture, tell you the honest truth, people ask me, you know uh why do get involved in this, why do get involved in that, and after 35 years, I am more than willing to share my skills and knowledge, more than willing to jump back in front line. Whew,
And there's a tremendous difference there between sharing your skills and knowledge and being in the front line, being in the leadership of it. But what I have got from you, Gregory, and it's been an absolutely wonderful conversation, is that positive reinforcement is important, and we seem to focus a lot on the negativity. And that is something that I think is absolutely wonderful. Another learning that I got from today is the importance of the community. And if we could start to build communities again, another very important thing is, you say, we have the assets, we have community centers, we have churches, we have all kinds of places where we can have our children understand. So,
And we have
was
the
your
human
comment?
resources too. We have the human resources too. We just have to recognize that we have to we have to shift them away from where they are now, trying to survive as doing jobs that they do to pay the rent, to put food on their table, to send their children to school, um, and get them involved where their passion really lies. I mean, as I said, but in any positive reinforcement, let me give some practicalities here. So I have 3 children, yeah, 3 kids. And I'll be like, okay, when you finish, can you wipe down the table, do the dishes? Right. They're not doing it. I have to remind them, I have to remind them, I have to remind them, I have to remind them. And then one day I come and it's like, wait, the dishes done? I go and I tell them, I say, thank you very much for doing the dishes. And I didn't have to ask you, and I really appreciate that. And just try and see if you could make that part of your everyday experience, come into the bedroom, things in disarray. It's like, can you clean up your room, please, a bit? Da, 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 da. Okay, your room is in a mess. Keep reminding, keep reminding. One day I come inside, the room is clean. Daddy, look, I cleaned up my room. You happy now? I say, I am elated. I am very happy. And you did such a great job. And I really appreciate that. I appreciate that. I see things, and when I capture things, and the youth I've worked with over the years will tell you that too, when I see them doing the right thing, I call them out on it and I
Yes.
congratulate them and I say, that is great. And you know what? That does so much for the young
Oh,
person. It is unbelievable because all they get
as,
is negative, negative, negative. Nobody see.
like,
We are blind to the good that they do. Our eyes are wide open to the negatives that they do.
so that, thank you very much, Gregory. And our departing note is focus on the positives and reward people for doing the things that make our country better. Thank you very much, Gregory Sloan Seale. And it's been Power Conversations. Join me next Monday at 9 o'clock, at 8 o'clock for Power Conversations. Thank you and goodbye.